Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alyson Grange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alyson Grange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un hosts grand welcome ceremony for Russian President Vladimir Putin. The two leaders sign a treaty of mutual assistance against aggressors. Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te says the island won't bow to China's pressure as Beijing attempts to force it into submission using military force and coercion. More than 550 people have died due to the heat-related illnesses during the Hajj pilgrimage in Mecca as temperatures rise above 50 degrees Celsius. Fire at a military ammunition depot triggers several powerful explosions in Chad's capital of N'Djamena, killing at least 9 and injuring over 40 others. Chipmaker Nvidia dethrones Microsoft to become the world's most valuable company with over $3.3 trillion in value amid a boom in artificial intelligence. Hello and welcome. We start with the big story from Kenya. Massive protests have erupted in the country's capital, Nairobi, against the Ruto government's proposal on new tax hikes. Hundreds of protesters, mostly of the youth, gathered outside the Kenyan parliament. Now, the protesters were met with harsh resistance as police hurled tear gas canisters. The unrest forced businesses in the capital city to close temporarily amid the fear of looting. Around 300 protesters have been arrested. People in Kenya fear that the proposed taxes will exacerbate the cost of living crisis, lead to job losses, and stifle economic growth. Civil society groups say despite arrests, the protests and sit-down outside the parliament building will continue.
In my time yangu, I've read it, and I'm sure there's so many politicians in that gas house that don't understand what the finance bill is saying. You know, I just want to say that the power is with us. We, the young people, will take over and will conquer. Power to the people.
The new tax hikes have been proposed in the Finance Bill 2024 that is due to be debated in Parliament and passed before the 30th of June. The bill is a part of the latest efforts by President William Ruto's administration to boost revenue and reduce external borrowing for Kenya. Last month, President Ruto defended the proposed taxes, saying the country must be self-sustaining. But as the protest escalated, the Ruto administration scrapped plans to impose some of the contentious hikes proposed earlier. Now, this includes a 16% levy on bread, the proposed taxes on motor vehicles, vegetable oil, money transfers, as well as a proposed ecological tax that targeted products with adverse effects on the environment. The levy would now only apply to imported goods.
Proposals to the legislature. The legislature have interrogated those proposals. the public has interrogated those proposals. The public have recommended, through public participation, their feelings, their ideas, their suggestions, and because the people's representatives have listened to the people through public participation, they have adjusted the proposals from the executive.
The original bill, which was first presented in Parliament last month, also seeks to increase import duties for goods, raise taxes on telephone internet data, digital businesses and food delivery services. When William Ruto came to power in 2022, he promised to revive the economy and to alleviate poverty. But in the last 2 years, his policies have sparked widespread discontent. He has raised income tax, doubled VAT on petroleum products to 16%, and increased health insurance contributions. Ruto says these steps have been taken to eliminate the country's debt of nearly $80 billion. While Kenya is among the most dynamic economies in East Africa, roughly a third of its population lives in poverty. It is currently dealing with stubbornly high inflation and debt distress. Its GDP is also expected to slow to 5% this year from 5.6% in 2023. Though the new tax bill will face opposition, it is likely to be passed as Ruto's alliance holds a majority in the parliament. Now, for more on this, we have with us political and economic analyst Professor Alyson Iraqi, who is joining us live from Nairobi. Hello to you, Professor. Thank you for being with us.
Hello, good afternoon. How are you?
Great. Thank you. Now, massive protests have erupted in Nairobi over the new tax hikes. What could be the immediate impact of these tax hikes on the people of Kenya if they are implemented?
I think the most immediate effect will be a rise in prices. Because when taxes go up or when new taxes are introduced, the businessmen or entrepreneurs always pass that cost to the consumer or to the customers. So if there are new taxes, the prices will go up. And remember, the prices are going up when we had further price rises because of the war in Ukraine. The price of petrol went up. The price of other commodities went up. Remember, we had recent floods in Kenya, and that is going to affect the price of food because some food was affected by drought. So if the prices goes up, there will be less demand for goods and services because people not afford, and that is going to lead to job losses. And if there are job losses, we might have some social instability because hungry people often hungry people. So that will be the immediate effect if the taxes goes up or if the taxes are implemented.
Now, since coming to power, President William Ruto has introduced several new but unpopular measures with the aim of reducing Kenya's debt as it reels under economic distress. In your opinion, how effective could the Ruto government policies be in eliminating debt? And if not, could there be an alternative approach?
I think eliminating debt is not as easy as it sounds. Remember, some of this debt is long-term, is in bonds that are going to be maturing the next 20, 30 years. So it's not easy for any government, including developed countries' government, to deal with debt. So what we probably need to think is how we can eliminate debt in the long run, but not in the short run. Even with the tax raises, the government is still borrowing money. And that's why the interest rate for some bonds are going up. So I think the most sensible solution or the best solution we can come up with is to reduce waste and to reduce corruption. And most Kenyans believe that if we reduce the waste, if we reduce corruption, I think there will be no need for more debt, there will be no need for higher taxes. And that can be immediate.
Yeah. Right, and anger against William Ruto has been growing, with protesters now demanding him to step down. Could the failure of his economic policies lead to his political downfall?
That is very unlikely under the current circumstances in Kenya. Remember, President Ruto doesn't have a credible opponent for now. So what I foresee is in 2027, the current economic crisis will affect the voting patterns. So we should not be talking about uh, President Ruto losing power now. We should be talking about 2027, which is not very far away.
Professor, thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa and your valued insights.
Thank you and have a good evening.
Shifting focus to South Africa now, it has been a big day for Cyril Ramaphosa. He has been sworn in as president at a grand ceremony in Pretoria. He has officially inaugurated his second 5-year term before MPs, foreign dignitaries, religious and traditional leaders at the Union buildings.
And so today, my fellow South Africans, is no ordinary day. It is a moment of fundamental consequence in the life of our nation. It is a moment when we must choose to either move forward together or risk losing all we have built.
Around 20 heads of state and government, many from neighboring nations, attended the ceremony. High-level officials from other countries, including China, Cuba and Palestine, also attended. The ceremony included a 21-gun salute and a flypast by the South African Defence Force, in which they pledged their allegiance to the Republic and the Commander-in-Chief.
In this moment, we must choose to move forward, to close the distances between South Africans and to build a more equal society, to translate the promise of our Constitution and the vision of the Freedom Charter into a reality for all. This moment requires extraordinary courage and leadership. It requires a common mission to safeguard national unity, peace, stability, inclusive economic growth, non-racialism, and non-sexism.
The swearing-in of President Ramaphosa was conducted by Chief Justice Raymond Zondo in the Union Building's Nelson Mandela Amphitheatre. The inauguration commenced with a cultural program with local artists showcasing their talent and sharing South Africa's cultural diversity. The theme for the occasion is 30 years of democracy, partnership and growth. Throughout South Africa's history, inaugurations have held significance, and today's ceremony continues this tradition, celebrating democracy and leadership. The president took an oath of office, officially marking the end of the 2024 national and provincial government election cycle. Now, despite a 17% drop in voter support for the ANC, Ramaphosa has retained the presidency through a government of national unity with the DA, the IFP and other smaller parties. This is the third time that Cyril Ramaphosa has taken oath as president. He first came to power in 2018 after his predecessor and now rival, Jacob Zuma, was forced out before the end of his term amid corruption allegations. Ramaphosa was then reappointed for a full 5-year term in 2019. He had promised a new dawn for South Africa and launched an anti-graft campaign. But in his last tenure, the country's economy crumbled. Unemployment rose, crime and corruption remained rife, and there were frequent power cuts. Last month, he led the African National Congress into yet another vote, but Nelson Mandela's party came out bruised. The ANC had lost majority for the first time since the end of apartheid in 1994. The country was left scrambling for coalition partners to remain in power. It has since agreed to form a government of national unity with several other parties, including the opposition Democratic Alliance and the Inkatha Freedom Party. Now, at his swearing-in ceremony, Ramaphosa hailed the formation of the coalition as the beginning of a new era for South Africa.
The formation of a government of national unity is a moment of profound significance. It is the beginning of a new era. As we enter another era in the life of our nation, the resilience of our democracy has once more been tested, and the people have spoken loudly that they choose peace and democracy over conflict, violence, undemocratic and unconstitutional methods.
Now, with the swearing-in ceremony complete, Ramaphosa is staring at the next big challenge, the coalition cabinet. The ANC said it would form an inclusive cabinet, but the party still has to work out how to divide the top cabinet jobs and to overcome ideological differences with its new partners. Negotiations between the unity government partners will determine the composition of the executive. Discussions will be held on preferred portfolios, positions, and cabinet candidates, and key ministries such as finance, energy, foreign affairs, and public enterprises are among the most coveted portfolios. Unity government partners are expected to call for the plum cabinet posts. So, for Cyril Ramaphosa, balancing the demands of coalition partners and the ANC top brass could be tricky. What is certain is that the Ramaphosa 2.0 cabinet will undergo a major overhaul. And now shifting focus to Sudan. The civil war-hit African country clashed with the UAE at the United Nations Security Council. Khartoum accused Abu Dhabi of providing arms and other support to the paramilitary RSF and further fueling violence in Sudan. The Sudanese ambassador to the UN said that the UAE must stay away from Sudan and that this was the first requirement that would allow stability in the country.
Whoever wants to create peace in Sudan must first come with pure intentions, and the United Arab Emirates is the state that is sponsoring terrorism, that is a racist kind of terrorism, and this has been proven by the report issued by your own council.
Sudan's ambassador accused the UAE of assisting RSF forces through militias in Chad, southern Libya, and Central Africa. Backing up its claim of Emirati interference, Sudan also submitted copies of half a dozen UAE passports that it says were found on the battlefield in Khartoum. He also claimed that wounded RSF fighters were airlifted to Dubai for medical treatment. Khartoum called on the council to openly condemn the Gulf state.
We have submitted to you, Mr. President, a week ago, 6 UAE passports that we found in Khartoum in joint operations perpetrated by the Rapid Response Forces, and you have not published this as we have asked. We did not steal these passports from the suitcases of UAE citizens in the UAE. We found them in the heart of the battlefield.
The United Arab Emirates rubbished claims made by Sudan. The Emirati ambassador called the Sudanese allegations ludicrous. He also said one of the warring parties of Sudan was using the UN Security Council to spread false allegations against the UAE to distract from grave violations on the ground.
We see this as a shameful abuse by one of the warring parties of Sudan of this council, using this platform to spread false allegations against the UAE, to distract from the grave violations that are happening on the ground. There will be no military victory or a military settlement of the conflict in Sudan. The only way to settle will be through the negotiating table.
Sudan has been reeling under a civil war since April last year. The Sudanese army, headed by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF, led by Mohammed Hamdan Hagaldo, have been at loggerheads, pushing the country into a humanitarian crisis. Over 15,000 have been killed and millions have been displaced in the brutal fighting. For months, Sudanese army has accused Abu Dhabi of supporting the RSF. In April, Sudan requested an emergency Security Council meeting on its accusations. However, that request was never fulfilled. On Tuesday, Sudanese ambassador took advantage of a regularly scheduled meeting on the situation in Sudan and launched a verbal attack on the UAE. The UNSC, without naming any country last week, urged the UN member states to refrain from external interference. It also called the nations to respect of an arms embargo on Sudan. Reports, on the other hand, have pointed out Iran's role as well in aiding the Sudanese army. Videos of attacks carried out by the army have shown that they were carried out with the help of Iranian-made drones. The UN has accused both Iran and the UAE of violating the arms embargo to Sudan that bars the supply of weapons to both the warring sides. While the blame game and verbal wars continue, the situation on the ground is worsening with each passing day. Sudan now faces one of the world's most catastrophic humanitarian disasters. And as more nations enter the race to increase geopolitical footprint by arming the warring parties, they are only making the war deadlier. And finally, to our special segment, Resurgent Africa. Amid reports of coups and crises that dominate headlines from the continent, we get you positive stories that often get overlooked. Our story today is from Zimbabwe. The southern African nation has found a single solution for multiple problems that it faces, be it unhealthy lifestyle, environmental issues, depleting fossil fuels, or a poor public transport system. The problems are plenty and complex. But the government says cycling could be the sole solution. The Zimbabwean authorities are urging citizens to pedal to work, not just for their health, but also for the well-being of the planet. Our next report tells you more.
Heart issues, obesity, a poor immune system, joint stiffness. It's a long list. An unhealthy lifestyle can cause many problems, and most of them persist throughout our lives because we're slaves to technology that makes our lives simpler, but also in many cases contributes to poor health. But the South African nation of Zimbabwe has come up with a way to push its citizens towards a healthy lifestyle. The Zimbabwean authorities are urging citizens to use cycles as a mode of transportation. If you're wondering why, here's your answer. Jacob Mafume, mayor of the country's capital city of Harare, has said that most health problems ail society because we sit all the time. Meanwhile, cycling to work can have health and environmental benefits. The mayor has a point here. Cycling benefits you in numerous ways. It can help lower your weight because it burns calories and reduces fat levels. Cycling helps lower the cholesterol levels in the body. This in turn helps boost cardiovascular health and lowers the chances of strokes and heart attacks. The pedaling strengthens your leg joints without overstressing them. And the benefits aren't limited to physical health. Cycling also improves mental health because it reduces stress, depression and anxiety. There's more. Studies have revealed that cycling can reduce the risk of certain types of cancers. According to a 2019 research, it also reduces risks of breast cancer treatment, including fatigue. By urging people to cycle to work, Zimbabwe is not only trying to solve issues pertaining to its citizens' health, it's also trying to resolve shortcomings posed by the lack of proper infrastructure because Zimbabwe battles a broken public transit system, poor road conditions, and fuel shortages. It is a low-income country with many development challenges. And people's woes are only increasing as the nation struggles with hyperinflation and currency instability. This is where your two-wheeled, often overlooked friend comes in, because bicycles are cost-effective and easily available. But they don't just help people, they're also good for the environment. Bicycles promote a clean environment because they don't use fossil fuel and they reduce both road congestion and accidents. Instead of feeling sorry for themselves, Zimbabweans are focusing on solutions, and their solution-oriented mindset is worth taking inspiration from. Zimbabwe is not killing two, but many birds with one stone.
And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.